This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. Parsha Lecha. The first mitzvah that was given to Avram Avinu, of course, is the mitzvah of bris milah. And the question we want to deal with is that we know we have a tradition that Avram Avinu was Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula even before it was given. Right? That's our Messiah, that's our tradition. The pasuk says, Ekev Asher Shama Avraham B'Koili. Avraham, listen to my voice. We know Avram Avinu kept even Erev Tavshilin, right? Even the laws of in order to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So even Avram Avinu kept the laws of Erev Tavshilin. Even first, right? Avram ate matzah. He sat in the sukkah. He kept the entire Torah. Right?
With the truth.
So here's the question.
We just ended the last class with bris milah, whole mitzvah with bris milah.
Oh yeah? Okay, so they sent me a message, right before the show what I should talk about. I told them whatever you end off with, that's what we're going to talk about.
You doing a mitzvah with the truth?
With the mitzvah, with the bris milah.
So,
Did he do a mitzvah with the truth or with that?
So Avram Avinu was Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula even before it was given, with the exception of one mitzvah. There's only one mitzvah Avram Avinu didn't do. He only kept 612 mitzvahs. He didn't keep 613. Which mitzvah didn't he do? Bris milah. Because he's 99 years old and he still doesn't have his bris. Until Hashem comes and he says, Abraham, it's time, shine sight. What are you waiting for? It doesn't get any easier. So that the question is, why is it that Avram Avinu is Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula? Did Pidyon Haben? He did everything.
He didn't do Truma and Meiser.
Sure he did.
His wife forget.
Truma, Meiser, he did everything. He did Truma Meiser. He gave Meiser, right?
No,
so the question is, why did he not do milah? Why didn't he do milah? So the famous answer of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, we'll see about Pidyon Haben. He may not have done Pidyon Haben. But the famous answer of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, one of the, what we call the super commentaries on Rashi, he's a commentary on a commentary, says Mizrahi, mitzvahs milah lo kaima ad shenestavala. He did not perform milah until he was commanded. Why? Mishum diyodea haya Avraham knew shaite lehitztavisala. He knew he'd be commanded. Va'aziyah mitzuva va'isa. And then he would perform it when he's commanded. Shehu gadol mimi she'ena mitzuva va'isa, which is greater than someone who wasn't commanded. So Avram Avinu knew about milah. He knew he could have done the milah, but he didn't do it because he wanted to do it on the highest possible level, which is when he would be commanded. So wait a second. So why did he do any of the other mitzvahs? Yeah. Why did he sit in the sukkah? Why did he eat matzah? Very simple. He sat in the sukkah and he said to himself, let me sit in the sukkah, and when God commands me, so then I'll continue to sit in the sukkah, and sit in the sukkah as one who's commanded. But bris milah,
you get one chance.
Right? You only have one chance. So Avram said, if I do bris milah before I'm commanded, I'll never have the opportunity to do bris milah when I'm commanded. And therefore Avram Avinu, of all the mitzvahs in the Torah, the one mitzvah he didn't do is bris milah.
He could have done it tough on bris, though. He could have been.
That's not the full mitzvah.
He could have taken himself out of being a mohel.
Right, he wouldn't fulfill the mitzvah completely. So this answer of the Mizrahi is not so simple. Not such a great answer. As the Marsha asks, the Marsha in Masechta Yevamos Daf Kuf asks, and you have it on your sheet at number 30, the Marsha asks that this answer of the Mizrahi is not going to help you. Right? Why not?
Because he has a mitzvah to do it at 8 days.
Because first of all, that's a very difficult answer to say. He was waiting till he's commanded, and it doesn't really explain Abraham's whole life. You know why? Because what about the fact that Avraham Avinu married Hagar? Hagar was from which nation? She's Italian. She's a mitzvah. She's a mitzvah. Even if you cannot marry a mitzvah, right? A mitzvah cannot come b'kal Hashem. So don't tell me that the reason why Avraham Avinu didn't do milah is only because he wanted to be commanded. Because there are other things Avraham Avinu violated. For example, he married a mitzvah. Says the Marsha, this is a problem with the Mizrahi, because it's not going to explain all of Abraham's behavior. Okay. So what we would like to explore today, perhaps, is another beautiful reason why Avram Avinu did not perform bris milah before he was commanded. Okay. There's a pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyahu that says the following. Kaya Amar Hashem. So says Hashem. Im loy brisi yoimam v'layla. If not for my covenant of day and night, chukai shamayim v'aretz lo samti, I would not have created heaven and earth. if not for my bris, there would be no world. What is this pasuk talking about? What would you say? Milah. In fact, the Mishnah says in Masechta Nedarim, Gedoyla milah, milah is very great. She'il malahi, if not for milah, lo'ibara hakadosh baruch hu esaylamai. God would not have created the world. You know, God says, should I create the world? Should I not create the world? Oh, milah? Fine, I'll create the world. How do we know this? Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Kayamar Hashem, im lo'ibrisi yomam v'layla, if not for my covenant of day and night, chukay shamayim va'aretz lo'isamti, I would not have created heaven and earth.
How about bris bein absam?
No, bris bein absam, he could have gone without the world. The bris bein absam would not have cut it. No pun intended. He needed bris milah, right? He needed bris milah. If not for bris milah, God would not have created the world. That's what the Torah says. That's what the Navi Yirmiyahu says, according to the Gemara Nedarim. The problem, though, is if this pasuk, Kayamar Hashem im brisi yom v'layla, what's the Gemara saying it's referring to? What does the Mishnah say it refers to? Milah. How do you read the words? Im brisi yom v'layla, if not for my covenant of day and night. How could that be referring to milah? You can't do milah at night. It says vayom hashmin imam Allah, so you can only do milah during the day.
But you have the milah.
Im brisi yom v'layla. What does this mean?
But the bris, once you have it, once you've done it, then you have it at night too.
In fact, I'll tell you why it's very shver. Because, simply put, the pasuk Kayamar Hashem im brisi yom v'layla is not referring to the bris of bris milah. You know what it's referring to? Talmud Torah. In fact, right? Look in Pirkei Avos, right? The second mission in Pirkei Avos. It says the world stands on three things, right? Shimon HaTzadik hayu mishyari knesses hagdola. Hu haya omer hashloisha dvarim ha'olam omed. Ala Torah, ala avoda, ve'agmilos chasadim. God created the world for three things. One of them is Torah, learning. Says Rashi, how do I know the world stands on Torah? Look at Rashi number 7. Shenemar im loy brisi yomam v'layla. If not for my covenant of day and night, chukah shamayim va'aretz loy samti. Now, if the pasuk is going on Torah, the pasuk reads beautifully, because im loy brisi, if not for my bris yomam v'layla, which mitzvah do you do yomam v'layla? Which mitzvah does it say v'higisa ba yomam v'layla? Torah. Just simply put, the pasuk is referring to Torah. If not for the covenant that you perform day and night, I would not have created the world. Yet the Mishnah Nedarim says it's not going on Torah. It's going on bris milah. So how do you read the words? You can't do the bris day and night. So there's a well-known Taisus Yamtif from Masechta Nedarim. Look at number 5. Afal gav dein molen ela b'yayim. So he said, like you said, yeah, Rabbi Yosef, once you have the milah, so the milah is on you day and night. But then he says, I'll read the pasuk a little differently. Give me a knife, you have one anyway, right? For the milah, you're going to cut up the pasuk. You read the pasuk like this. This is what Hashem says. Im loy brisi, if not for bris milah, now take your knife and cut the pasuk. If not for bris, then guess what? Yomam v'layla, day and night, chukash ma'aretz, heaven and earth would not have been created. You read the pasuk like that. Kayamar Hashem, im loy brisi, if not for my bris milah, you know what would not have been? Yomam v'layla, chukash ma'aretz. Okay. What? Yeah, but you see, here's an important thing. A lot of Bali Kriya, they have a disease called esnachtaitis. And a lot of guys, let's say there's if you read it like that, you're not Yotzei the Kriya. If you don't stop after an asnachta, or it's also tipchaitis. Imloi brisi. Tipcha is what we call a melech in Chup. It's a pause. You need to pause after a tipcha. Tipcha is a major stop. The Zohar says if not for a tipcha, the world would be destroyed. We'll talk about that a different time. But you read like this: Imloi brisi, stop. Yeah, Balkairi who runs over the tipcha, Mishnah Berurah says bevadai machzir noisei. You gotta stop him. Right? You gotta correct him. But in any event, so we have another number of problems over here. Number one, I don't understand something. What's this pasuk talking about? Is it talking about bris milah, or is it talking about Torah? The Mishnah in Nedarim says what? It's talking about bris. Elsewhere in Nedarim, and like Rashi quotes in Pirkei Avos, it's talking about Talmud Torah. So what's this pasuk talking about? It can't be talking. Did God create the world for bris milah, or did He create the world for Torah?
Torah.
I mean, we would have.
It was in 2,000 years until Abraham.
Yeah.
There was no bris milah. How did it exist?
Well, how did the world exist?
Yeah, for 2,000 years.
What is this pasuk talking about? Did God create the world like the Gemara Nedarim says in the Schus of Bris Milah, or did God create the world as the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos in the Schus of Torah? I'll ask you another question. Right, let's go back to this Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Yeah, Shimon HaTzadik says the world stands on three things: Torah, Avoda, Gemilas Chasadim. He left one out. Which one did he leave out? Bris Milah. What happened to Bris? You know, he doesn't like Bris. Doesn't like bagels? What is it? So we're going to have, Rabbi say, 10 questions here. Okay? So hold on to your socks. The first question is we want to know, why did Avraham Avinu not perform bris milah before he was commanded? He performed all other 612 mitzvahs. Why not bris milah? Number 2, why in Pirkei Avos doesn't it say that the world stands on bris milah? After all, the Mishnah says in Nedarim, if not for bris milah, God would not have created the world. And let's see number 9. The Gemara Nedarim says, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Gedola Torah. Torah is very rich. Shomale Torah, Leinis Gaimu Shamayim Va'aretz. If not for the Torah, the world couldn't exist. Shenamar Am Lebrisi Am Laila. So I don't understand. You can only learn one thing out of a pasuk. How could you learn out from the same pasuk the world stands on bris milah and the world stands on Torah? I mean, there's one pasuk. It's telling us the world stands because of brisi. What's brisi? Is it the bris of milah or is it the bris of Torah?
I think they'd be connected.
Yeah, that's why I have a job. Right? So you have to see what's the connection.
You will?
No. I have a shiur. Okay. Now another Gemara. Very interesting. The Gemara says also a little bit later on in Nedarim, Davar Acher, Gedola milah is great. Sheshkula keneged kol ha-mitzvah shebeTorah. It's equal to all 613 mitzvahs. Let me talk about highway robbery over here. It's equal to all 613 since when? I know every morning when you wake up in the morning you say Elu Dvarim Shem L'Shur. The Talmud Torah keneged. So the Gemara Nedarim says, you know what? Once in a while you could switch it. You could say Ubris milah keneged kulam. Where did that come from? Since when? Since when is bris milah equal to all 613 mitzvahs? Okay, now next question. That's question number 4. Next question is very interesting. If you want to say that we have a covenant just between me and you, right? Let's keep this between me and you. What does that mean? Nobody else knows about it. No one else could see it. No one else could know such a thing. Why is it that by bris milah it says Zois brisi asher tishmeru beini uveinechem? This is a bris that's between me and you. Between me and you. Yeah, now this is not my question. This is the question of the Eilos Ephraim. Bris milah is not a private. It's a bris between us and Hashem. It's a public spectacle. You have a bris milah. Everybody sees. Everybody sees what's happening. It's not some kind of secret. So why do we say the bris is only between us and God, as if to say like only God knows about it? Only God knows about it. It's not a secret. Anybody could tell. Why? This is the question of the Eilos Ephraim. Why by bris milah of all things it says beini uveinechem? It's specifically between us and God, as if no one else could possibly know about such a thing. Okay. Hashem gives the Torah to Klal Yisrael, and Klal Yisrael says what? Nasa v'nishma, right? Not really. That's the second time. But what do they say the first time? Nasa. Which Parsha is Nasa v'nishma in? Nasa v'nishma is in number 13, in Parshas Mishpatim. Vayikach Sefer HaBris, Moshe takes the Torah, Vayikra ba'aznei ha'am, Vayomru, and they say, Kol asher diba Hashem, Nasa v'nishma. But that's not what they responded originally. In Parshas Yisro, Parak Yotes, number 12, Vayanu kol ha'am yachta, Vayomru, Kol asher diba Hashem, Nasa. What changed? What happened between Parshas Yisro and Parshas Mishpatim that first Klal Yisrael says, Na'aseh, and then they respond, Na'aseh v'nishma. Very interesting. Look at number 14. Af Adam Arishon Yatsa Mahol. Adam Arishon was born Gemalat. How do we know that? Shenemar Vayivra Elokim Es HaAdam B'Tzalmai. God created man in His image. So if God created Adam in His image, it must be Adam was created already circumcised. What does that mean? That makes sense. Oh, how do we know Adam was created with already Gemalt? Because he's created in the image of God.
We're also B'Tselem.
When you take a copy and you make a copy of a copy, it sometimes gets a little,
Still a copy.
What does this mean? That since Adam was created B'Tselem Elokim, he must have been created with a milah. And then later on, the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that after the Chet of the Eitz Hadas, Adam Arishon Moishech Ba'arlasai Haya. Moishech Ba'arlasai means he hid the milah. He pulled back the foreskin. What does that mean? Why did he do that? Yeah, what does that mean? Okay. By the Kriya Shem, by a bris milah, so you say, in the Nusach of the Kriya Shem, Yismach ha'av, b'yotzei chalatzav, the father will rejoice. B'sagal imai, the mother will rejoice. B'fri bitna. Kakasov, like the pasuk says, Yismach avicha, okay, the father will rejoice. V'imecha, and the mother. B'sagal yoylad techa, and someone else, the third person will rejoice. Yoylad techa,
Hashem.
the one who bore you. Who's that? Well, the Gemara says, Kal ha'melamed es ben chaveroi Torah ki'ilu yoladak. You teach someone Torah, it's like you taught him. It's going on the Rebbe. What do you bring the Rebbe here?
He's away, 5 years away.
Yeah, the Rebbe, he's the kid still got time before the Rebbe's going to see any nachas from this kid. Why do we say Yismach avicha? The fathers will be happy. The mother and the Rebbe. Why the Rebbe? What's the Rebbe going to be happy about? Why do we invoke the Rebbe at the bris milah? Okay. And finally, a question that we really all should be bothered by, but we probably say it too often to ever think about it. And that is in benching. Okay. We say the first thing we thank Hashem for is Noidol Hashem Lekeinu Al Shenchat Aviseinu Eretz Chamda Tov Rechava Ve'al Shetzisanu Hashem Lekeinu Me'eretz Mitzrayim Ufsi Sanu Beis Avadim Ve'al Bris Hashem Zov Tzvein Ve'al Terosh Shalimadatan. Okay, so the first problem is what? No, it's out of order. Thank you for Eretz Yisrael. Thank you for taking us out of Mitzrayim. Thank you for bris milah. Thank you for Torah. Why do we first thank Hashem for Eretz Yisrael? First we should thank Him for taking us out of Mitzrayim, and then we should thank Him for Eretz Yisrael. The order makes absolutely no sense. Why do we start off by thanking Hashem for Eretz Yisrael? So Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in his commentary on the Siddur, the first thing we thank Hashem for was what the ultimate goal of everything was. He took us out of Mitzrayim, and He gave us the bris milah, and He gave us the Torah, so that we should enter Eretz Yisrael. So first, we get down to first we thank for bottom line. Bottom line is, thank you for Eretz Yisrael. And then we go back to order. So Yaakov Emden says the order is still bad. Why? Okay, fine. Good. And for bris milah? Does anybody know when did we get bris milah? Historically. When did we get bris milah? Right? The night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Hashem looks, He sees, V'ad Eram ve'Ariel, we were naked and bare of mitzvahs. Hashem gave us 2 mitzvahs. Dam milah and Dam Pesach. When was bris milah? Yetzias Mitzrayim. Before we left Mitzrayim. The night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we had bris milah. So then why in the benching? What?
How is it night again?
Good kasha. That's a good question. So we have a share on that, but maybe Pesach time. Right? When did we get bris milah? The night of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So if that's the case, so the benching should say, Al shenchat v'seinu eretzchem l'Torah rechava. Thank Hashem for Eretz Yisrael. V'al brischa shechasamta b'v'sareinu. Thank Hashem for bris. V'al shohitzisanu Hashem l'keinu me'eretz Mitzrayim. And thank us for taking us out of Mitzrayim. Thank Hashem for taking us out of Mitzrayim. But why do we first thank Hashem for taking us out of Mitzrayim, and then thank Him for bris milah? It's out of order. So Rabbi Yaakov then says, even though Klal Yisrael did the milah Mitzrayim they didn't do the Priya yet until they came into Eretz Yisrael.
So people who died in the Midbar never had it.
Right. In fact, people who were born in the Midbar didn't have milah at all
No, maybe
until they came there. So no, Rabbi Yaakov
I think that like by Neufel, right? You do a bris milah before you bury him.
Yeah.
So maybe over here also, when they buried him, they did the priya.
Okay, maybe. But listen to Rabbi Yaakov Emden saying, the reason why we don't mention bris first is because they had the bris in the family, but they didn't have the priya until they entered Eretz Yisrael. Like we find in the time of Yeshua in Parakeh.
Excuse me, what's Priya?
Priya is when you pull back the arla. You pull it. After you cut it, you pull it. Okay, so
About the sons of Moshe.
that was a long time before. That was they may have had. But the problem is, if they didn't have the Priya until they came into Eretz Yisrael, that was after the Torah was given. So then the order should be, thank you for taking us out of Mitzrayim. Thank you for the Torah, and then thank you for then milah should be last. In other words, make up your mind. Why is milah stuck in between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Torah? It really happened before Yetzias Mitzrayim. Elamai, what do you want to say? The full Priya didn't happen until later, so then it should be listed after Torah. But what are we stupping it in before Torah for in the benching? I mean, this order, right? If somebody handed in this composition, right? You're a principal, right?
Yeah.
Someone handed in this composition, you ask them, put it in order. They would fail. They would flunk. They would flunk. So, okay. Okay. And finally, the Shibale Haleket brings down, look at number 19. The numerical value of bris is 613. 12. Right? Bris. Beis is 2, Resh is 200, Vav is, Yud is 10, and Taf is 400, 612.
But with the
and plus the bris itself, that's a 613. Yeah? But that's a little odd. Why specifically bris milah do we say it's equal to 612 plus it, that's 613? I mean, you should be able to do that for any mitzvah. Every mitzvah should be 612 plus it is 613. But we don't say that. Specifically bris. Bris is 612 plus itself is 613. Okay. So let's see if we could shed some light on some of these issues. We have an amazing story brought down in the Taisvis in Parshas Mishpatim, a story about Unclus, right? Unclus Hagar. Unclus was the nephew of Adaryanos Kezar. Let's take a look at it inside. Ma'aseh be'Unclus Hagar. There's a story with Unclus ben Achoisei shel Adaryanos Kezar. He was the son of the sister of Adaryanos. Shabikesh lehiskaya. He wanted to convert. Unclus wanted to convert. V'haya misyarei midaydai. He was afraid of his uncle. Yeah, he was afraid his uncle would, beat him up or something. Amar Loi, ani mevakesh la'ases schara. So he tells his uncle, look, I need to go somewhere. I need to go on a business trip. Yeah? Amar Loi. He said, the uncle said, Shema chasar ata kesef v'zav harei otzvas v'fanecha. Why do you want to go do business? What, you don't have enough money? You're lacking money? Here are the keys to my storehouse. You can take whatever you want. No. He says, I need to go out on my own and make my own way in life. He says, I need to go out to the outside world. If you're just going to always give me money, I'm never going to develop my own talents. I need to go out on my own. Right? To be able to deal with people. Do me a favor. I trust you. What kind of business deal should I engage in? He said like this. He said, find something that's, cheap, down on its luck, something really low, plus, a little bit, something that's nobody's interested in. Invest in that, you can only go up. That was his advice.
Be a contrarian.
Right? If you see something, that's really down on its luck, be involved in that. You'll make a lot of money. So where does he go?
Stock is low.
Yeah. Halach Eretz Yisrael. He goes to Eretz Yisrael, he goes to Israel. He says, he comes into the Shiva. He says, I'm here. He said, what's your name? My name is Unclus. You're Jewish? No. You have a milah? No. But I want to learn Torah. Amar Lai, ein divrei Torah miskaimin el benima. You won't understand that. He said, why not? He said, because you don't have a milah. He said, huh? What does one thing got to do with the other? Because I don't have a milah, I can't. I'm learning with my head. Halachumal. He went and he had a milah v'lama Torah. However, he learned a lot. Umatzur Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shua v'ro panav meshunais. Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shua took a look at Unkelus. All of a sudden, they see his face looks different. Amru zel azeh. They said to each other, it must be he learned Torah. He's a different person. Miyad sheba etzlam hischol lishol shelas harbi. He asked his rabbeim a lot of questions. Then finally, he's headed back to Adaryanos. Halach etza Adaryanos. He goes back to his uncle Adaryanos. Amar loi. He said to him, Lama panecha meshunais. You know, your face is aflame.
Shining.
Your face is shining. Why? Amar loi shalmadit Torah. I learned Torah, but not only that, v'lo ela shamalti. I had a milah. Amar loi umi yatzlach kach. Who gave you this ridiculous advice? Amar loi ata. You're the one who told me to learn Torah. Shamarti li, you told me, get involved in something that's down on its luck. Eventually, it will go up. Right? I went to every nation, and I didn't find anything more downtrodden than the Jewish people. Right? Than Torah. Eventually, they're going to go up. Skip a line. He smacked him. What do you do this for? He said like this. I wasn't interested in the milah. I wanted to learn Torah. So he said, yeah, right. But what's with the milah? So learn the Torah. Why do you have the milah? You can't learn Torah without milah. Shenemar Maggid Harakiah liYaakov Chukav Mishpatav liYisrael. Why does it say Yaakov? Why not Bnei Yisrael? No. Lamisha hu mahol k'Yaakov. Only someone who has a milah like Yaakov, who was born with a milah. Uchsiv la yasachein l'chalgai u'mishpatim Baal. Says Taisus Baal. Baal. The Torah begins with a beis, ends with a lamed. If you want to learn what it says in between Baal, the beis, and the lamed, you need to have a milah. So the question we need to ask Rabbi Isai is, why, in order to learn Torah, do you need a milah? What in the world does milah got to do with Torah? Seemingly, they're completely I couldn't possibly think of two mitzvahs that have no connection to each other than bris milah and Torah. And yet, Unkelus Hager is saying, I wanted to learn Torah, but they said, there's one thing. You need to have a milah. Why? So we come to really an amazing concept. And the concept is that the main function of milah is not to cut the foreskin, not to cut the arla. That's only the external act of the bris milah. But we're going to see in many, many sources that when you cut the external foreskin, it removes somehow spiritually something that covers the heart. Whether it may even be a physical thing, it may be scientifically intertwined, or maybe it's a spiritual covering, and by removing the physical foreskin, the spiritual covering of the heart is removed, and now the heart is open wide to understand the Torah. But with the foreskin, the physical foreskin, the heart is sealed shut, cannot comprehend Torah Hashem. Who says this? Number one, the Eilulos Ephraim. Eilulos Ephraim was Rabbi Ephraim Lunchitz, the author of the Kliyakar on Chumash. Okay? The Eilulos Ephraim writes in Ois. It should be Shin Sadi Beis. He writes like this. Emes Nachain Hadavar. It is true. Shahamila Shkula Keneged Kol HaMitzvah Shabbatayra. Milah is equal to all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Shemisparam Tafrei Shiur Beis. The numerical value of milah is 612. Zulas Hamilah, besides the milah itself. V'Hamilah Nikreis Bris. Milah is called bris. Oisios Lemispar Tafrei Shiur Beis, which has a numerical value of 612. Imkein Hishkula Keneged Kulam. Now listen to this. V'Oid Shehisiba Lamol Arlas Halev. The milah is the cause that removes the covering of the heart. Shahatayra maschelas u'mesayemes by. In order to learn Torah, what do you need to have? You need to have a mind. You need to have a heart, right? In Tanakh, the mind is called a lev. Uvalev kol chacham lev nasati chachma. God put wisdom into the heart. No, why doesn't it say the brain? In Tanakh, the brain, the mind is called the heart. The Torah, right? That's the introduction. If you want to learn Torah, you have to have a lev. That's why the last letter of the Torah is a lamed. The first letter is a beis. Without a milah, your heart is clogged up. It's stuffed up. It's shtupped up. You can't understand anything. The cutting of the physical arla removes the arlas halev. V'imkein hisiba umakar l'chal hahasagas alakios. Milah is what opens the mind to understand any spiritual ideas. In fact, the amazing thing, based on this idea of the Oilos Ephraim, Rabbi Kiva Eger paskins halacha l'maisa. Okay, they asked Rabbi Kiva Eger the following question. When at a bris milah, so there are two brachas. You make asher kedushanim v'misayis v'tzivano al hamila. Who makes that bracha? The male. Then you have another bracha. Asher, right? Lahachnisai bevrisai shel Avram Avinu. Who makes that bracha? The father. Why does the father make that bracha? If the male is the one who's entrusted to do the mitzvah,
The father's mekuyim, the male is just a shliach.
so if the male is just a shliach, the father should make the bracha on the milah also, right? You can't have it both ways. If what? So if he's doing the ma'aseh on my behalf, so let me make the bracha al hamilah. If you need to make the bracha because you're the one doing it, then you need to say la'aknisa. I mean, these are two mitzvahs. These are two brachos. That either the male should make both, or the father should make both. Either the male should make the bracha al hamilah and la'aknisa, or the father should do it. So the Rabbi Kiva Eger quotes a Lavush, that the Lavush wonders, why in the world should the father make the bracha la'aknisa bevrisai shel Avram Avinu? After all, the male is doing it for him, and shulcha shel adam kamaisai. Says the Lavush, the lehachnisai is not going on the milah. Lehachnisai is that now that he has a milah, now you could teach him something. Now the kid will understand Torah. Without a milah, the kid will never understand Torah. Who is responsible to make sure the kid understands Torah? The father. So it's the male going to make the bracha lehachnisai. The father makes the bracha lehachnisai. So listen to this case.
What if there's no father?
So Kiva Eger wants to know, what if the father's not alive, right? Who should make the bracha lehachnisai b'vrisa shel Avram Avinu if there's no father? So some poskim wanted to say, let the male do it. Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, no. The grandfather has to make the bracha lehachnisai. So people said, the grandfather? If the grandfather is not commanded to make sure the kid has a milah, why would the grandfather make the bracha la'achnisai b'vrisai shel Avram Avinu? Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, because la'achnisai b'vrisai is not going on the milah. It's going on teaching Torah. And the same way a father has a responsibility to teach a kid Torah, the grandfather has a responsibility to teach a kid Torah. So even though the father makes the bracha what? Even though the father makes the bracha of... Even though the male makes the bracha al hamilah, the grandfather can make the bracha la'achnisai bevrisai shel Avraham Avinu. Why? Because it's the grandfather's responsibility, if there's no father, to make sure the grandson learns Torah.
Why is it called la'achnisai bevrisai shel Avraham Avinu? Where do you say the Torah? How does that relate?
So maybe we'll be able to come to that. Okay, says Rabbi Kiva Eger that Torah and milah are not two independent mitzvahs. They're really two sides of one coin. Because since if you don't have a bris milah, you can't understand one word of the Torah. Yeah, you could say it, but it won't register, it won't be absorbed in your mind. So therefore, milah is what allows the understanding of Torah. So we had a question. How could the Gemara Nadarim say that the pasuk in Brisi Yom V'Layla is going both on the mitzvah of bris milah and on the mitzvah of Torah? It can only be talking about one thing. The answer is very simple, Rabbi Kiva Eger says. It's going on Torah. But without a bris, you can't understand it. It's not going on two different mitzvahs. It's going on one mitzvah. It's going on learning. But without a bris, you can't learn. We had a question. Since when is bris milah shakol keneged kol ha'Torah kula? Right? The Gemara Nadarim says, milah is equal to all the 613 mitzvahs. No, it's not, right? We call that highway robbery. Only Torah is equal to 613 mitzvahs. You're right. Only Torah is equal to 613 mitzvahs. But if you don't have a milah, you can't learn anything. We had a question. If bris milah is so important that the whole world stands on bris milah, so why did the Tana and Pirkei Avos not list bris milah as one of the three things the world stands on? There's a fourth. It did list it. Where did it list it? Torah. Because without a bris, you can't learn. Without a bris, your heart is clogged up. It's stuffed up. It cannot comprehend the Torah. Says the Oilos Ephraim, an amazing thing. Amazing thing. When Chazal tell us that Adam Harishon was created B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Right, remember? And the other, right? Look at number 14. In Avos Reb Nasan, it says Adam Harishon was created mahol. He was created circumcised. Like, how do I know? Because he was created b'tselem Elokim. Just like God is circumcised, Adam was circumcised. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Because he was created b'tselem Elokim, therefore he was created with a milah? Says Oilais Ephraim, look at Rashi on that pasuk. He was created b'tsalmai. What does it mean that man was created b'tsalmai? Lehavin ulahaskel, to comprehend. Just like God has Havana, comprehends the true nature of the world, Adam had Havana. So now the question is, how did he comprehend anything if he didn't have a milah? It must be he was gemalet. In other words, if Adam was created b'tselem Elokim, which means, according to Rashi, he was lahavin ulahaske, he was able to comprehend the world, it must be he was created with a milah. But after the Cheder of the Eitz Hadas, where Chazal tell us, his mind was clouded. So then, figuratively, Adam Harishon was Mashach Ba'arlasai. He lost the milah. The milah is just symbolic of the heart being open to comprehend the Torah. And I'll tell you something very interesting. Halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. Look at number 28. The Ramah writes, L'chatchila, when you eat an animal, you need to remove the arlas halev of the animal. You need to remove, there's a covering, there's a covering of fat on the heart of the animal. Before you eat the animal, you need to remove that covering. Look at the Ramah writes in Yardea. V'nayagen l'chadchila lachdoich arlas halev. L'chadchila, remove the arlas halev. Why? Why? The Ramah says it's only a chumrah, and it's only a zahiros. Says the Shach, look in the Sefer Rikanti ala Torah, that since bris milah, the bris milah represents the arlas halev, so how could you eat the arlas halev of an animal? It's going to be matame your heart. It's going to be matame your own heart. So therefore, l'chadchila, that's what we do. Go ask a butcher. The arlas halev of an animal needs to be removed. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, what?
Only men, not female. The female does not have bris.
Because she may not have an arlas halev.
Yeah, exactly.
She may not have an arlas halev.
I think the Briscoe says that. No,
yeah.
Like
But it says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, listen to this. The benching is not out of order. It's in order. First, we thank Hashem for what the goal of everything was. Which was what? But then we go back. Thank you, Hashem, for taking us out of Mitzrayim. So what do you want us to do? You want us to thank Hashem for bris milah after Torah? No. We're not listing it in sequential order. We're listing it in order of necessity.
Why?
And order of necessity is, first you need bris, and then Torah. First we thank Hashem, bris chashachasantu v'v'sareinu, v'yal Torah shalim adatanu. It's not, we're not ordering in historical order. We're listing in order of acquisition. First what needs to be done is bris milah, then what needs to be done is Talmud Torah, because if a person does not have a bris milah, the Torah does not register in his mind. Right? Yeah. It's very interesting.
Now, one question.
Yeah.
You know, you said the skin doesn't let the heart to learn Torah, right?
Yeah.
So when you take the skin out, the heart opens up. So what about the goys that they have the bris in the hospital and they take the skin out?
Halachic bris milah. Halachic bris milah. Halachic. This is not just a physical thing. This is a spiritual concept. There's an arlas halev, like in the Chumash we say, "Umaltem es arlas levavchem." I'm going to circumcise the arla of your heart. Doesn't mean Hashem is going to physically come and do a bypass, right? When the Torah says "Umaltem es arlas levavchem," it's not talking about cleaning out the arteries, right? It's not talking about bypass, right? It's a spiritual process. Somehow, by removing
mental cholesterol.
Yeah.
But that increases the intelligence of the one who is circumcised?
Yes. It's not a matter of intelligence. Learning Torah is not intelligent. It's a ability to learn, absolutely.
So you take a guy and do the procedure.
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's halachic milah. It's halachic milah.
So maybe taking the skin and the bracha of the brit milah that the mohel says that enhances the with the bracha.
No. The bracha is not ma'akev. It's by performing the mitzvah. The mitzvah God made the Arlas Habasar somehow intertwined with a spiritual Arlas Halev. But that's the purpose of the milah. The purpose of the milah is by physically removing the Arlas Habasar, that somehow, that's the mitzvah, somehow it removes the blockage of the heart. Whether there's a scientific, physical blockage, that very well may be. Whether there's a spiritual blockage, that is certainly the case. There's an Arlas Halev, which is removed by the bris milah. Rav Pam says that's why after a milah we say, Kishem shen nichnas la bris, right? Ken yikanes la Torah. The same way we enter the bris. Now when you enter the bris, that opens up the heart. So now the heart is ready to learn. Okay, it's not enough just to be ready to learn. You have to actually learn also. So Kishem shen nichnas la bris, Ken yikanes la Torah.
Do you say that by your care?
Yeah, why not?
I don't know. I've never.
Me neither. Yeah.
My neighbor was in a concentration camp, and he told me a story. He had a friend who was afraid to go into the showers because he would be identified as a Jew, so he undid his bris.
Okay. That's what we say by Adam Arishan, who was Mashach Bar Lasai. But
the Hellenists did the same thing.
what? Right. In the Misyavnim. Misyavnim. Okay, Rabbi said just a couple more interesting points. Now we understand that at bris milah we say Yismach Avicha V'imecha V'sagel Yoiladtecha. The Rebbe will also be happy. What's the Rebbe going to be happy for? What does the Rebbe care? The kid has a bris or the kid doesn't have a bris? Says the Sefer Bris Ephraim. Now we understand. Because now that the kid has the milah and the Arlas Halev has been removed, now the Rebbe has, okay, have something to work with. Now the Rebbe is very happy. Says the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai says an interesting remez. It says in Shir HaShiurim like this: Eis hazamir higia, Eis hazamir higia, v'kol hatar nishma b'yartzeinu. Right? What is zamir? Zamir could mean pruning, right? Cutting. Eis hazamir. Once the time for the cutting comes, v'kol hatar. Now we could hear hatar could also be rearranged. Kol hatayra higia. Now we could hear the kol haTorah. Because without a bris milah, Torah is not understandable. Okay. So Rabbi Say, very interesting thing. Remember we started the shiur by asking, why did Avraham Avinu not perform a bris milah right before he was commanded? He kept all other mitzvahs before he was commanded. Why didn't he do bris milah? So we're going to learn a very interesting marsha. Says the marsha, number 30. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 line, the fifth line. The fifth line. Look what the Marsha says. You know why Avraham Avinu did not fulfill bris milah? He says, Aval Hareim Kasa on the fourth line. The Reim writes, Ki Avraham Avinu kiyem kol haTorah afilu erev tafshilin. Aval mitzvahs milah loy kiyem. He didn't fulfill milah. The Yodea Haya da Asid Litzavasla. He knew he would be commanded. Va'aziyah Mitzuva va'isa. For who dachak? The Marsha says, I don't like this answer of the Mizrahi that Avraham Avinu didn't do it because he wanted to be commanded. Gam Kash, it's also difficult. Imkain Lama Nasa Mitzvahs Kaidam Shanimo. Why did Avraham marry an Egyptian? How could he marry an Egyptian? Says the Marsha, I'll tell you why. Avalafi Shita Seinonicha. Dechol ger loy nitztava b'mitzvahs ad achar milah. Avraham Avinu kept the whole Torah. He only kept the Torah before it was given, after he had a bris milah, not before he had a bris milah. Because before you have a bris milah, you're not even shaykh to keep the Torah. Avraham Avinu only kept the Torah after he had a bris milah. So you'll ask me a question: why did Avraham Avinu keep the whole Torah before it was given, but he didn't do a bris? He only kept mitzvahs after a milah. So you'll have a question. So why didn't he do bris milah? He didn't do bris milah because he didn't have a bris milah yet. That's why.
Right. That makes sense.
Right? You want to know, Avraham Avinu didn't keep any mitzvahs before he had a bris milah. So now we have a question. Why didn't Avraham Avinu do bris milah? Because he didn't have a milah yet. Avraham Avinu only kept the Torah after his bris milah.
What did he do until 99?
Nothing.
Nothing?
He didn't do anything at all, says the Marsha.
Maybe Torah gave him a bris.
No.
No.
Didn't have one.
Oh,
According to the Marsha, it's not a question to begin with. Because Avraham Avinu did not keep the Torah before the bris milah. So you want to know, why didn't he do a bris? He didn't do anything before the bris. So he should have done the bris before the bris. Yeah? Now, a person who doesn't have a bris doesn't do any mitzvahs. So now I have a question. Why didn't Avram Avinu do the bris milah before he was commanded? He didn't do any mitzvahs before the bris milah. That's what the matter. What?
He did shechita and stuff before.
So, well, you were there? Even Menachai, I'm saying he kept the Zayin mitzvahs from Noach, but to keep the 613 mitzvahs. What?
Did you get that?
First he gave them challah, then he gave them basar.
So you're saying he violated it?
That was after the bris. Wasn't that after the bris?
That was after bris milah, yeah. No, that was already on the third day of...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah? The Marsha says Avram Avinu only kept the Torah after bris milah.
In other words, the bris
Yeah, the mitzvah of the Akedah.
That was after the bris milah. And that's not, Akedah is not among the 613 mitzvahs. The Marsha says Avram Avinu only kept 613 mitzvahs after bris milah.
So in other words, the prerequisite for keeping mitzvahs.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah, prerequisite. So you want to have a question, why didn't he do bris before he was commanded? Someone who doesn't have a bris can't do mitzvahs. It's as simple as that.
When did he marry Hagar?
13 years before the bris.
He married Hagar before the bris milah. 13 years before.
Did he marry her if he had a bris milah and have relations with her?
No, he could have married her because she was an Egyptian. But the problem is, right, the problem, we had a question, how could Abraham Avinu marry an Egyptian? You know what the answer is? He married her before he had a bris milah.
Right. That's right.
That's what the Marsha says. But Rabbi said that we're not here to say the Marsha's answer, we're here to say a new answer. Okay? Why Avraham Avinu did not fulfill bris milah before it was given. Okay? And this is really a beautiful answer. I have a question for you. We know Avraham Avinu, his whole life, he was learning Torah. How does that make any sense according to our shiur today? We learned today that it's impossible to understand Torah without a bris, because your heart is clogged up. And if your heart is clogged, you can't. So how did Avraham Avinu spend his life learning Torah if he was uncircumcised? So there's a very interesting sefer, La Bris Habet, by Rabbi Lezer Ginsburg, art scroll. And he brings down an answer to this question, what he thinks the answer is. And that is, there's a medrash that says, who taught Avraham Torah? Who taught it to him? Who taught it to him? Says the medrash, his two kidneys became like two jugs of water, and they issued forth Torah. In other words, there's a concept, right? Haklayos yoatzos. The kidneys are sources of knowledge, right? Even scientifically, there may be a correlation between intelligence and kidney function, right? But that's what the medrash says. The kidneys opened up and taught him Torah. So says Rabbi Lezer Ginsburg, why is it that you can't understand Torah before bris milah? Because your heart is clogged up. Avraham Avinu didn't use his heart to learn Torah. He used his klayos to learn Torah. He used his kidneys. So he bypassed, he circumvented the wave. Right? He bypassed. However, we're going to explore a different reason. How Avraham Avinu was able to learn Torah before he had bris milah. And that is the commentary of the Panim Yafes, the Hafla, at the end of this week's Parsha. The end of the Parsha, it says like this. Listen carefully. Ba'avram ben Tishim v'teisha shanim Behimaylai Besar Arlasai. Abraham was how old? 90, right? 99. When? Behimaylai Besar Arlasai. Now listen to this. What does it say by Yishmael? The Yishmael ben Shloish Esrei Shana, he was 13. Behimaylai Eis Besar Arlasai. By Abraham it says Behimaylai Besar Arlasai. And by Yishmael it says Behimaylai Eis Besar Arlasai. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, we know that the word ace always includes. By Yishmael, it was a bigger job than by Avraham. By Yishmael, it was ace Basar Alasai. By Avraham, it was just Basar Alasai. Why? Because Yishmael was a young kid. The Aver, that part of the body, was completely full. So therefore, it required a lot of cutting. But Avraham Avinu was already an old man. The Aver was already part of it was rubbed out due to Tashmish Hamita. Rashi is Rashi on Chumash, and therefore it doesn't say Eis B'sar Lasai, it says B'sar Lasai. That's what Rashi says. Comes the Hafla says a different pshat. That's not what it means. You know why by Yishmael it says Eis, and by Avraham it doesn't say Eis? Because by Yishmael, two things were happening at his bris milah. He was cutting off the physical arla, the arlas habasar, and thereby cutting off the arlas halev. So two things were happening. It was behimaylai Eis b'sar arlasai. So two things. But by Abraham, when he did the milah, only one thing was happening. He was only cutting off his physical arla. Why didn't he cut off the arla salev? Because Abraham had already succeeded from the time he was young in removing and purifying his heart, where he himself removed the arla salev without the milah. How do I know that, says the Hafla? Because the pasuk says, look at number 33, Atahu Hashem Elokim. You are God. Asher b'charta ba'Avram. You chose Avraham. At first he was Avram. V'hoitzeisei me'or kazdim. V'samta shmai Avraham. And he now became Avraham, Rashi says, where he ruled over all 5 added organs of the body. When he had the milah, he ruled over his 2 eyes, his 2 ears, and the arla. And you found his heart to be pure. Says the Hafla, you know how you read this pasuk? At first he was Avram, 243. He only ruled over 243 organs. When he had the milah, he now ruled over all 248. What were the added 5? The 2 eyes, the 2 ears, and the milah. So the Hafla says, shouldn't it be 6? Shouldn't it be he ruled over his lave also now? Says Hafla, no. His lave was always pure. Why? How do we know his lave was always pure? Because Avram Avinu had already removed the arlas halev all the way in the beginning of his career. Says the Hafla, how is Avraham able to learn Torah if he didn't have a milah? Because the reason you can't learn Torah if you don't have a milah is because you have an arlas halev. But Avram Avinu had succeeded in removing the arlas halev. So Avram Avinu was able to learn Torah even without the milah. So now you have a kasha. Why didn't Avraham do milah before he was commanded? For what? For what purpose? He already succeeded in accomplishing the purpose of milah. He had already removed the arlas halev. So we want to know, why did Avram Avinu, why didn't he do the milah before he was commanded? There was no point in him doing a milah. It was pointless. He had already accomplished what milah is supposed to accomplish. Then Hashem said, I want you to do a milah. Hashem said, so I'm okay, I'll do the milah. But it's not a kasha why Avram Avinu didn't do milah before he was commanded. Because Avram Avinu was already umatzasa, slavavai, neman lefanecha. His heart was already pure. He had already removed arlas halev. He already fulfilled the tachlis of milah. He already achieved the purpose of milah. And therefore it was not necessary for Avram Avinu. He already did it. So now that Hashem commanded him, he said, even though the tachas already been fulfilled, I'll do it because you told me to. But it's not a question. We want to, why didn't Avram fulfill the milah? Because how b'chlal did Avram Avinu learn Torah before he had a milah? What about the arlas halev? You have to say, the arlas halev Avram Avinu already succeeded in removing. That's the case. It's not difficult why Avram Avinu did not perform bris milah before he was commanded.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.